only player that'll be listed as questionable will be Puka, but it's similar to last week. He was a participant yesterday, did a really nice job, and he's feeling good, and so is the rest of our group.
You do expect him?
I do. Yeah, I as of right now, yes. And we prepared for that, kind of like I mentioned earlier in the week, Sarah. Whether it's Joe or whether it's Browning, it's going to be a really great challenge for us. But that's our expectation, and we'll go with that until I hear otherwise.
What was the reasoning behind coming back and forth over the next week?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of dialogue about that. It's really what it boiled down to was let's keep the players in more consistent elements, their own beds. When you talk to some of the sleep experts and different things like that, we felt like that was what was best. Wanted to be able to get them back. We'll modify our approach in terms of our weekly rhythm next week. But you know me, I'm right here, right now. But that was a lot of things that we talked about in the off season, and whatever's best for the players is always what we're going to do. And so that was kind of the thought process. You talk to Reggie and his group, and they do a lot of deep dives. And then part of it too is, all right, what are the facilities? Where would we stay? What would that travel look like? And so that was kind of the thought process there. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because Sophie and her group does such a good job of the planning. And so as soon as the schedule comes out, then you really start to identify, all right, what does it really look like? Because there's been, whether it's when we've traveled abroad or we've stayed in other places like what we've done in Atlanta or we did it in Jacksonville in previous years. But that was definitely something that we had talked about, but that was how we came to the conclusion of let's come back, and then you got to almost treat it like a combination of a Thursday kind of game in terms of your weekly rhythm in the early parts of it, I would say. You're welcome.
First time going to Cincinnati since the Super Bowl. Like, how obviously every road environment is.
You don't count the preseason, huh? I'm just kidding.
But how much do you address that with the younger guys who weren't on that team, didn't experience that game?
You don't talk about that much. What you do talk about is that there is continuity and consistency with some of their coaches that are coordinators, or obviously Zach was still the head coach, and they still have some players that were a part of that. They still have a lot of players that were a part of that Super Bowl appearance in 21. So that's as far as it gets. But every single year, every game presents new challenges. But you look at some of those things, I think you'd be silly not to do that. But Cincinnati's going to be rocking. It's a great atmosphere. They're a great football team. It's way too early to get caught up into records and things of that nature. We know what these guys, how talented they are. We know how well coached they are, and so we're looking forward to the challenge.
Hi, Sean. After last week's game, you talked about a small margin for error. Is there anything specifically this week, whether it be a player, a group, even just a snap that kind of stood out to you, something small that was pleasing?
I think it's their approach. I think the consistency is what I would say is my favorite part about it is, I think that ends up being a really true measurement of performance. And obviously we got the result we wanted in week 1 and we came up short last week like you talked about. But the guys came to work the same way. They're giving themselves a chance to improve. They've got a zest and a love for competing and going through the process the right way. And when you look at last week, I think all those games, and not exclusive to just San Fran, Seattle was the same way. You can learn a lot of things and you can realize, all right, where are those pivot points in the game? And there was a couple plays, some that we can control, some that we can't control. And how do we really spend our time on figuring out how we eliminate our margin for error on the things that we can control, and then the stuff that we can't, how do we move forward and not let it affect us? And I've been really pleased with just their approach and the consistency that I've seen, and I think we're getting better, and that's the most important thing I want to see.
Sean, now that the backfield is essentially Kyron's fully when he wants.
I want to see him continue to play the way that he's played, Stu. You'll get an opportunity to see Ronnie as well. Ronnie's a guy that we have a lot of confidence in, and whether it ends up being Zach or Royce, we're kind of still continuing to work through that as far as that third back. But I've been really pleased with Kyron. Obviously, I thought his contributions in both phases, and really when you look at it as a runner, as a protector, and then as a receiver, I thought he really competed at a high level. He's so conscientious. He's only going to remember the one play that ends up leading to a tip turnover. But you talk about, all right, what are your fundamentals? And I have all the trust in the world in him being able to learn from it the right way. And like I've talked about, when you guys ask me about a lot of our different players, I think the cool thing that I can truly feel is like these guys are embodying a lot of the things that we want to see come to life in terms of what we're looking for in Rams, and been really pleased with Kyron.
another young guy. Like, what is it that you trust about him as the primary?
He did a good job in some of the opportunities that he got last year, Adam. I was really pleased with that. I think just the consistent body of work, whether that be through the preseason and practices, the way he works, his ownership. He and Kyron are similar type players in terms of their build and their versatility. Ron Gould's leadership in that room, but I just think it's just continuing to evaluate him and just his overall feel for the game, his competitiveness, and I've been pleased with a lot of things he's done on teams as well.
Players have said that in the early parts of this last offseason, you sort of took the front of the room and said, I'm paraphrasing, but something like, you're going to be a physical football team this year. Can you harken back to that time and what you were trying to communicate and what you see now?
I think it's a style of play, but I think it's also it's about the players, Jordan, and you know that. And I think we've identified a lot of guys that, hey, I see better than I hear, and the way that they play, the way that they compete, the way that they support one another, the way that they continue to strain just a little bit more. That's powerful. And then when you can continue to show and then reward good examples of what that looks like, then it just becomes, man, if these guys are doing it and some of the guys that have been setting the example are doing it, well, this ends up being the standard. And that's what I think the good teams do. I think that's what we've had when we've been operating at the levels that we want. But that's in alignment with what I think the players on this roster are and what we felt like was best. And it's always about those guys. And I've been really pleased and want to continue to see that growth. And I've seen it show up in the practices. I saw it show up in training camp in the offseason. And then I think there's been a lot of really good things that you can look at when you're just sitting there and you're watching that silent tape in the first couple weeks that you can really be proud to be associated with it and want to continue to do your part to be able to help them play as well as they can. And them playing that hard is something that's it's awesome to see.
When you have a younger team, is it easier to see the growth week to week?
I think when you have the right perspective is the best thing, and you have guys that have a real open mindset, and so it's always about people, Sarah. But I also think, and you've heard me talk about it, I think it's also about making sure that you don't lose perspective on the values and principles, and what are the things that move you forward the right way. And a lot of the things that you hear me talk about that I'm really pleased with the players. Well, are you checking the box, whether it be myself or our coaches? And so that's what makes it easier to do, is because you're surrounded by the people that do that. And I'm a big believer in you become the company you keep. And then when you care about those people and those players and those coaches so much that it's like, man, I don't want to let them down more than some of your own selfish goals and ambitions. That leaves your cup a lot more full.
I understand you want to.
Oh, here we go.
Well,
Just go ahead.
You've been talking about care and reaching out. Are you staying in touch with Stetson, and do you expect to see him?
I have, yeah, and he's doing really well, which I was really encouraged to be able to hear. I'm not really sure on a timetable with anything, and so that's been the good thing. I got a chance to hear his voice, and he sounds really good, and that was really cool to hear. You're welcome. Okay, thanks, guys.